What if I told you that the oil change advice your mechanic gives you is designed to get you back in the shop, not to maximize your engine's lifespan? A retired Nissan engineer recently went on record explaining the truth behind common maintenance recommendations, and what he revealed is going to change the way you think about car care forever. Before we dive into these industry secrets, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss the shocking truths we're about to uncover. Let me introduce you to Hiroshi Tanaka, a man who spent 37 years inside Nissan's powertrain engineering division. When he retired last year, he decided to break his silence about something that had been bothering him for decades. The maintenance schedules that mechanics follow, he says, are not actually optimized for what's best for your engine. They're optimized for business. And before you think this is just conspiracy theory talk, understand that Hiroshi worked directly on engine longevity testing. He knows exactly how long engines can go between services, and the numbers are very different from what you're being told. The first bombshell Hiroshi dropped was about oil change intervals. You've probably heard the old rule, change your oil every 3,000 miles. Some mechanics still preach this like it's gospel, but here's what Hiroshi revealed. Modern synthetic oils are engineered to last between 7,000 and 10,000 miles easily, sometimes even longer depending on your driving conditions. The 3,000-mile recommendation came from an era of conventional oils and older engine designs. Today's engines have tighter tolerances, better filtration systems, and oils that are light years ahead of what was available 30 years ago. So why do mechanics still push the 3,000-mile interval? Simple economics. If they can get you in 3 times instead of once for the same distance driven, that's 3 times the labor charges, 3 times the opportunity to upsell you on air filters and cabin filters and brake fluid flushes, and whatever else they can think of. Hiroshi explained that when Nissan tests engines for durability, they run synthetic oil for 10,000 miles between changes and monitor everything. Oil pressure, viscosity breakdown, contamination levels, where metals in the oil. The data consistently shows that high-quality synthetic oil maintains its protective properties well beyond what most quick lube places tell you. In fact, cutting the interval too short can actually waste your money without providing any real benefit. Your engine doesn't care if the oil is 2,000 miles old or 4,000 miles old as long as it's still within its effective range. The oil companies know this, the car manufacturers know this, and yes, the mechanics know this too. But it gets even more interesting when you look at oil filter technology. Hiroshi pointed out that most people don't realize the filter is just as important as the oil itself. A cheap filter changed every 3,000 miles is actually worse for your engine than a premium filter changed every 7,000 miles. Why? Because cheap filters have lower capacity, less efficient media, and weaker construction. They start bypassing unfiltered oil back into your engine once they reach capacity, which can happen surprisingly fast if you do a lot of stop-and-go driving. A quality filter costs maybe $10 or $15 more, but it's designed to capture smaller particles and hold more contaminants before it goes into bypass mode. Yet mechanics will slap in whatever cheap filter they have in bulk because it keeps their costs down and keeps you coming back sooner. The next revelation Hiroshi shared was about transmission fluid. This is where things get really controversial. You've probably heard conflicting advice about transmission services. Some mechanics say you should change your transmission fluid every 30,000 miles. Others say 50,000. Some even say never change it if the manufacturer says it's lifetime fluid. So who's right? According to Hiroshi, the truth is somewhere in the middle, but it's not what serves the mechanic's interest. Most modern automatic transmissions are designed with lifetime fluid, meaning the fluid should last the typical lifespan of the vehicle under normal driving conditions. That's usually around 150,000 to 200,000 miles. However, and this is a big however, that lifetime rating assumes you're not towing, not driving in extreme heat, not doing a lot of stop-and-go city driving. If you do any of those things regularly, your transmission fluid degrades faster. But here's where the mechanic scam comes in. Instead of testing your fluid or using objective measures, many shops just blanket recommend a transmission flush every 30,000 miles to everyone. They'll show you dirty fluid and say it's bad, but transmission fluid is supposed to be darker than when it's new. It picks up tiny metal particles from normal gear operation. That doesn't mean it's failed. Hiroshi said the real test is whether the fluid still smells right, whether it maintains proper viscosity, and whether there's excessive metallic content. Most shops don't do these tests. They just sell you a service you probably don't need yet, and sometimes the flush itself can cause problems in high-mileage transmissions by dislodging deposits that were actually sealing minor wear points. Then there's the coolant system, and boy, did Hiroshi have opinions about this. The standard advice you'll hear is to flush your coolant every 2 years or 30,000 miles, but modern long-life coolants are formulated to last 5 years or 150,000 miles. The difference isn't just marketing. The chemistry has fundamentally changed. Old-school green coolant used silicate-based corrosion inhibitors that depleted relatively quickly. Newer organic acid technology coolants, the orange or pink stuff, use inhibitors that last much longer and provide better protection against cavitation and electrolysis. Yet mechanics often ignore what type of coolant your car has and just recommend services based on outdated intervals. Hiroshi explained that Nissan's testing showed these extended life coolants maintaining their protective properties for well over 100,000 miles in controlled tests. The only reason to change coolant early is if it's contaminated, if you've had a leak that introduced air into the system, or if someone mixed different coolant types. But a healthy system with the right coolant can go way longer than most shops will tell you. Of course, coolant flushes are profitable services. They take about an hour of labor, they require chemicals and fresh coolant, and they're easy to sell because customers don't really understand what coolant does. They just know it's important for cooling. And nobody wants their engine to overheat. Air filters are another profit center that Hiroshi called out specifically. The engine air filter is one of the simplest components on your car. It's literally just a paper element that traps dirt before air enters your engine. You can visually inspect it yourself in about 30 seconds on most vehicles. Yet mechanics will routinely recommend replacing air filters that have plenty of life left in them. Hiroshi said the intervals in your owner's manual are already conservative. If your manual says inspect at 15,000 miles and replace at 30,000, those numbers already include a safety margin. A slightly dirty air filter isn't hurting your engine. In fact, filters actually become more efficient at trapping small particles as they accumulate a light layer of dust. Obviously, if it's caked with dirt or has leaves and debris in it, replace it. But that filter that looks a little tan instead of pure white, it's probably fine. The markup on air filters is insane too. A filter that costs the shop $7 gets sold to you for 30 or 40, plus labor to install something you could do yourself with no tools. Multiply that across hundreds of customers per month, and you see why shops push air filter replacements aggressively. Hiroshi laughed when he told the story of how Nissan tested air filters until they were significantly restricted, measuring actual airflow reduction and fuel economy impact. The results showed that fuel economy didn't measurably decrease until the filter was way dirtier than what any mechanic would call acceptable. Yet customers get sold new filters all the time based on nothing but a visual inspection and a sales pitch about fuel economy. Spark plugs represent another area where mechanics give advice that benefits their bottom line over your engine. Modern iridium and platinum spark plugs are designed to last 100,000 miles or more. These aren't the copper plugs your grandfather used that needed replacing every 20,000 miles. The precious metal electrodes resist wear incredibly well. Hiroshi worked on the engine calibrations that accommodate spark plug wear over time, and he said the engineers design in enough margin that even a spark plug at 90,000 miles is firing just fine for normal driving. But shops will test your plugs at 60,000 miles, see that the gap is worn slightly, and recommend replacement. Technically, yes, new plugs would perform slightly better, but the difference is so marginal that you wouldn't notice it in real-world driving. What really bothered Hiroshi was the scare tactic approach. Mechanics will pull a plug, show you the worn electrode, and imply that you're risking a misfire or engine damage if you don't replace all of them right now. The reality is that spark plugs degrade gradually and predictably. The engine computer compensates for minor changes in plug performance. You'd have to let them go well past their service life before you'd experience actual misfires, and even then, your check engine light would warn you. But people don't know this, so they authorize $400 spark plug services they don't need yet, all because the mechanic made it sound urgent. Brake fluid is fascinating because it's one service where mechanics actually underserve customers in Hiroshi's opinion. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture from the air over time. This moisture lowers the boiling point of the fluid and causes internal corrosion in brake components. Most manufacturers recommend changing brake fluid every 2 to 3 years regardless of mileage. But mechanics rarely push this service unless they happen to think of it or unless your fluid is visibly dark. Why? Because it's harder to sell. You can't show someone moisture content in their brake fluid without special testing equipment. The fluid might look fine even though it's absorbed enough water to be compromised. There's no immediate consequence to old brake fluid until you experience brake fade on a mountain road or a caliper seizes from internal corrosion. Since those things happen gradually or far in the future, there's no urgency in the customer's mind, so it's a harder sell than an oil change. Hiroshi said this was backwards from an engineering standpoint. If you had to choose between doing an oil change a little early or doing a brake fluid change on time, the brake fluid is actually more critical for safety. But shops focus on what's easy to sell and what customers expect, not necessarily what the vehicle needs most. It's a perfect example of how the incentive structure is misaligned with optimal vehicle maintenance. Tire rotation is another service that Hiroshi had thoughts about. Rotating your tires helps them wear evenly, which extends their life and maintains balanced handling. Most manufacturers recommend rotation every 5 to 7,000 miles. This is actually good advice that benefits you, but here's where it gets twisted. Many quick lube places offer free tire rotation to get you in the door because they know once you're there, they can sell you other services. That oil change you came in for at 3,000 miles that you didn't need? Oh, and by the way, we noticed your cabin air filter is dirty, your wiper blades are cracked, and you're due for a fuel system cleaning. The free tire rotation is the bait. The upsell is the trap. Hiroshi said Nissan's service departments were trained extensively on upselling techniques. It wasn't enough to do the work the customer scheduled. Service advisors had quotas for additional services sold. Technicians were incentivized to find things wrong. This creates an environment where the person inspecting your car has a financial motivation to discover problems. Now, to be fair, many of those problems are real. Cars do need maintenance and repairs. But when your income depends on finding issues, there's pressure to interpret borderline conditions as needing immediate attention rather than monitoring. Fuel system cleaners and engine flushes were particularly frustrating for Hiroshi because he knew the engineering truth. Modern gasoline already contains detergents that keep fuel systems clean. Top-tier gasoline brands have even more detergent additives. If you're using quality fuel, your fuel system stays clean naturally. Fuel injectors can get deposits over time, but it happens slowly and usually doesn't cause noticeable problems until well over 100,000 miles. Yet shops sell fuel system cleaning services to cars with 30,000 miles on them. They hook up a machine, run pressurized cleaner through the system for half an hour, charge you $150 and send you on your way. Did it hurt anything? Probably not. Did you need it? Almost certainly not. Engine flushes are even more controversial. The idea is that you pour a chemical into your old oil. Run the engine for a few minutes, then drain it out along with all the sludge and deposits it supposedly dissolved. Hiroshi was blunt about this. If your engine has sludge buildup, you've already neglected it severely. A flush at that point might help, or it might dislodge chunks that clog oil passages and starve parts of lubrication. If your engine doesn't have sludge because you've maintained it properly, then a flush is solving a problem you don't have. Either way, it's not a service that should be part of regular maintenance, yet it's sold as preventive maintenance to people with perfectly healthy engines. The differential and transfer case fluids in all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles are services that actually matter but often get ignored. Hiroshi pointed out that these fluids operate under high stress with fewer cooling provisions than engine oil or transmission fluid. They break down faster than people think, especially if you use four-wheel drive regularly or tow heavy loads. Most manufacturers recommend changing these fluids every 30 to 60,000 miles, but many owners never do it because mechanics don't mention it. Why? Because it's usually a messy job that doesn't pay well, and customers don't understand what a differential is anyway, so it's hard to sell. This is a case where the service would actually benefit the vehicle, but it's not pushed because it's not profitable enough or easy enough to sell compared to other services. Cabin air filters are the absolute worst offender in Hiroshi's opinion. This filter cleans the air coming into your cabin through the ventilation system. It has zero effect on engine performance or longevity. It's purely about passenger comfort and air quality, yet it's marked up even more aggressively than engine air filters. A cabin air filter that costs the shop $5 wholesale gets sold for $50 or $60 installed. The installation takes 2 minutes and often requires no tools at all. Hiroshi watched a documentary where a quick lube place was selling cabin air filter replacements to almost every customer by showing them the dirty filter and asking if they wanted their family breathing that air. It's pure emotional manipulation. Yes, a clean cabin air filter is nice to have, but it's not urgent, it's not safety critical, and it's wildly overpriced at most shops. Battery testing and replacement recommendations were another area Hiroshi flagged. Modern batteries last longer than ever, often 5 to 7 years in moderate climates. Shops love to test your battery and tell you it's weak and should be replaced soon, even if it's only 3 years old. The tests they run measure cold cranking amps and charge retention, but they interpret borderline results as needing replacement to avoid the risk of leaving you stranded. The truth is, a battery can test at 80% capacity and still start your car reliably for another year or two. But there's no profit in telling you to wait. There's profit in selling you a battery today with a healthy markup and installation fee. Hiroshi explained that Nissan designed electrical systems with significant overhead. Your starter doesn't need the full cold cranking amp rating of a new battery to work. It needs maybe 70% of that. So a battery testing at 80% is still well within safe operating range. Unless you live somewhere with extreme cold or you've had actual starting problems, there's no urgency to replace a battery that's testing slightly lower than new. But again, mechanics have incentive to sell, not to advise you to wait. Alignment services are legitimate and necessary when you've hit a pothole, replaced suspension parts, or your tires are wearing unevenly. But Hiroshi noticed that shops often recommend alignments based purely on mileage intervals, like every 2 years or 30,000 miles. Your alignment doesn't go out of spec just sitting there. It changes when something physical happens to the suspension geometry. If your car drives straight, doesn't pull to one side, and your tires are wearing evenly, you don't need an alignment. But it's an $80 service that takes half an hour on an alignment rack, so it's an easy upsell. So what should you actually do with all this information? Hiroshi's advice is simple. Read your owner's manual and follow the severe service schedule if you do a lot of city driving, short trips, or extreme conditions. Ignore the quick lube stickers and generic advice. Your manufacturer spent millions engineering your vehicle and determining optimal service intervals. They have more data and expertise than any independent mechanic. Use quality parts and fluids when you do service things. A few extra dollars for synthetic oil or a premium filter is worth it. Don't waste money on services you don't need, but don't skip the ones you do. Learn to do simple inspections yourself. You can check your own air filters, fluid levels, tire pressure, and battery terminals. The more you understand about your vehicle, the harder it is for someone to sell you unnecessary services. Find a mechanic you trust, and that trust should be based on them telling you what you don't need, not just what you do need. A good mechanic will say your air filter is fine or your transmission fluid can wait another year. They're thinking long-term relationship, not maximizing today's ticket. And finally, understand the incentive structures at play. A dealership service department has quotas and upsell targets. A quick lube place pays their employees based partly on services sold. An independent mechanic needs to keep the lights on and make payroll. None of this makes them bad people, but it does mean you need to be an informed consumer. When someone recommends a service, ask why it's needed now, what happens if you wait, and whether it's based on an actual measurement or inspection versus just a mileage interval. Hiroshi retired from Nissan with a comfortable pension and no financial need to rock the boat. He's speaking out because he genuinely believes consumers deserve to know the truth. The automotive service industry has evolved into something that prioritizes revenue over optimal vehicle care, and the gap between what your car actually needs versus what you're being sold has never been wider. If this video opened your eyes to how the game really works, do me a favor and share it with someone who might benefit from this information. Drop a comment below telling me about a time a mechanic tried to sell you something you didn't need. And remember to subscribe because we're going to keep bringing you insider information that saves you money and helps you make better decisions about your vehicle. The truth is out there, and now you know where to find it. Now, one thing that's important to understand is that Hiroshi's revelations aren't meant to make you paranoid about every mechanic you encounter. There are absolutely honest shops out there run by people who genuinely care about doing right by their customers. The problem is that you can't always tell the difference just by walking in the door. A sleazy shop and an honest shop might look identical. They might both have the same certifications on the wall, the same equipment in the bays, the same friendly service advisors. The difference is in the culture and the incentives, and those aren't visible to the customer. What Hiroshi's experience taught him is that the system itself is broken. When service advisors are judged primarily on the dollar amount they sell rather than the quality of advice they give, even well-meaning people start to rationalize recommending unnecessary services. It's just how human nature works. If your paycheck is partially tied to upsells, you start to see every customer visit as an opportunity to improve that day's numbers. You convince yourself that the services probably won't hurt, so why not recommend them? Over time, this becomes normalized. The shop culture becomes one where aggressive selling is expected and rewarded. Hiroshi also pointed out something subtle that most people never consider. The bigger the service menu, the more opportunities there are to sell something. This is why quick lube places have expanded so far beyond just oil changes. They've added tire services, fluid flushes, filter replacements, belt inspections, battery testing, and dozens of other things. Each new service is another chance to find something to upsell. It's brilliant business strategy, but it's terrible for consumers who just want honest advice about what their vehicle actually needs. One thing Hiroshi was careful to note is that this isn't unique to automotive service. This happens in every industry where there's an information asymmetry. The service provider knows way more than the customer, and there's money to be made by exploiting that gap. Dental work, home repairs, appliance servicing, computer repairs, pest control. In every field, there are incentives to oversell and exaggerate problems. The automotive industry just happens to be one where it's particularly effective because cars are complicated, most people don't understand them, and the consequences of ignoring maintenance feel scary. The fear factor is huge. Mechanics know that people are terrified of being stranded on the side of the road or having their engine seize up. That fear makes people willing to authorize expensive services they're not sure about. A service advisor who says your brake pads are getting thin and you should replace them soon is playing on your fear of brake failure. Never mind that brake pads give you plenty of warning through noise and feel before they fail completely. The image of losing your brakes is frightening enough that you'll approve the service. Hiroshi said this is actually one of the reasons why dealerships are often worse offenders than independent shops. Dealerships have more layers of management, more formal training in sales techniques, and more pressure to hit monthly targets. A young service advisor working at a dealership is being trained in sales methodology that would be right at home in a car lot or a phone sales center. They're taught how to present information in ways that create urgency. They're shown how to use visual aids like pulling out a dirty filter to create emotional response. They're trained on objection handling, which means learning how to overcome customer resistance to unnecessary services. The independent mechanic situation is more mixed. Some independent shops are run by crusty old-timers who'll tell you straight up whether you need something or not because they've been in business for 30 years and their reputation is built on word of mouth. Others are independent in name only, operating under the same business model as quick lube chains, just without the corporate branding. They're still primarily focused on maximizing revenue per visit. Here's something else Hiroshi emphasized that doesn't get talked about enough. The tools and equipment shops invest in also drive their service recommendations. If a shop just spent 50 grand on a new diagnostic machine, they're going to find ways to use it. If they have a fuel system cleaning machine sitting in the corner, it's going to get sold regularly because they need to generate revenue to justify that investment. This is why shops will often recommend services for the machines they have rather than the services the car actually needs. It's not necessarily dishonest in their minds, it's just business. Documentation is another tool Hiroshi pointed out that shops use effectively. When you get your service report back, it's often filled with pictures of dirty filters, charts showing fluid condition, and recommendations for future services. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It's protection for the shop if something goes wrong later. It's also a sales tool. The more concrete the documentation, the more real the problem seems to the customer. A service advisor saying your air filter is dirty is one thing. A service advisor showing you a professional photo of your filter next to a new one is much more persuasive, even if both filters are actually acceptable. The way information is presented matters enormously. If a technician finds that your transmission fluid is slightly darker than new, they can describe this as normal and expected or as a sign that service might be due soon. Both might be true simultaneously, but the framing changes whether the customer authorizes the service. A good shop will give you honest framing. A shop optimizing for revenue will frame everything in a way that suggests action is needed now. Hiroshi also discussed the role of manufacturer service bulletins and technical service bulletins, which are communications from the manufacturer to dealers about common issues and recommended procedures. These are legitimate information that reflects real experience with the vehicles in the field. However, they can also be interpreted broadly. If a bulletin says to inspect something every 50,000 miles, a shop might recommend replacing it at 35,000 as preventive maintenance. The bulletin doesn't say to do that, but it creates a framework where aggressive interpretation seems reasonable. What's interesting is that Hiroshi didn't think the solution is to distrust all mechanics completely or to do all your own work. Most people don't have the skills, tools, or knowledge to maintain their vehicles comprehensively. You need a mechanic you can trust. The solution is to educate yourself enough to ask intelligent questions and to understand the incentive structures at play so you can discount for them. When a service is recommended, ask why. Ask what the actual measurement or observation is, not just a mileage interval. Ask what happens if you delay. Ask if it's preventive or corrective. The questions themselves signal to the mechanic that you're paying attention, and honest mechanics appreciate that because it confirms they're dealing with someone who's engaged rather than someone who will just authorize whatever is suggested. Hiroshi's final piece of advice was to keep meticulous records of your own vehicle maintenance. Know what you've had done when you had it done and by whom. This prevents shops from claiming you haven't serviced something when you actually have, and it helps you spot patterns where you're being recommended the same service repeatedly. If you had your fuel system cleaned at 30,000 miles and another shop is recommending it again at 45,000, you can make an informed decision rather than just accepting that it must be due. Remember that while this video has focused on the ways shops can oversell services, the flip side is real too. Deferred maintenance is a genuine problem that costs people way more in the long run than preventive maintenance ever would. A timing belt that breaks because you ignored a 50,000-mile replacement recommendation will cost you $5,000 in engine damage instead of $500 for the belt. An engine that seizes from running low on oil is way more expensive than regular oil changes. The goal isn't to avoid all maintenance. It's to get maintenance that's actually needed without the unnecessary extra stuff. So go forward with this knowledge, be a smarter customer. Ask questions, read your owner's manual, and find a mechanic who earns your trust through honest advice, not just by what they sell you. Your wallet will thank you.